You're cutting my pay?
Just your sourcing budget?
And how is this going to help us?
Look what I found. This Super September, we can source products with the lowest prices in 90 days. You might even get a raise.
A raise?
Save for sure this Super September with the lowest prices in 90 days on Alibaba.com.
Hello and welcome back. From the Buyer Customer Success team at Alibaba.com, I am Ming Yang, and this is Super September webinar series. Super September is a 24/7 online trade show and promotional event. Our main theme this year is to help buyers stay competitive. You still have 2 more weeks to take advantage of the 90-day lowest price, on-time delivery, order discount and coupons, payment terms, and more. In addition, we're hosting a webinar series every Wednesday, the same time Wednesday, inviting sourcing experts, e-commerce masterminds, and entrepreneurs. They will share their stories, sourcing tips and insights, and their secrets of how to stay competitive. Feel free to leave your questions and comments, and we will get to that at the end of the session. So in today's webinar, I'm super excited to welcome David Applegate, the founder and CEO of ImportYeti.com. Hi, Dave. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Min. How are you doing today?
Very good. So, Dave, we have known each other for a while, and I told you the first time I learned about Import Yeti is from Alibaba Buyer, and you have a very interesting background. Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. So I started out in the e-commerce space. I have a company called Wrestling Mart, or my business partner and I, and we sell high school wrestling products like, that you see in the Olympics. And we grew for a number of years and really tried to take that niche by storm. And then, the pandemic happened, and, one of the projects we had kind of worked on was an internal tool to help us source products, because running an e-com store, you're constantly dealing with sourcing issues. What supplier do I choose? Is the right supplier? Where do I import things from? And we created an internal tool called, which is now called Import Yeti. And we've, put it online and have just stayed really close to the customer. And it's just grown like crazy, and it's turned into just an awesome resource to really help people make, stellar supply decisions.
Wow, I love that story. I know you have a physical store and you have online store. You launch your business from, ground up. And what do you think are the most challenging part of running a store, like online, offline, and how do you take on those challenging parts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of areas that get, that make things challenging. I think the first thing that really is honestly the hardest is it saying, like, am I creating genuine value? Am I building something that actually helps people? And that applies really wherever you're going. And I think in today's, online, we'll call it like, get rich quick culture, there's so much emphasis on just finding the right product, as if you're going to sell the same widget that everybody else sells, and it's magically going to make you a ton of money. But really, I think it needs a shift into how can I make something that really actually makes people's life better, that adds value, that they want to buy. And when you solve those problems, a lot of the other problems get easier. You get to focus on some of the more technical problems, which are still challenging, but they're much more manageable. Like a really good one is, how do I choose the right suppliers? Where do I import from? Like, those are all important questions, but they become much, much, much easier to solve if you're creating something that is actually adding a ton of value to someone's life.
Yeah, I really like that. Creating value for your customers and also solving problems based on solving a problem and start business there, right? That's how you started this website, ImportYeti.com. So while talking about that, I think we can wait to see how Import Yeti actually works. And can you show us how it works and how to use it?
Yeah. So I think the first kind of really important building block is saying, if you're going to try to find a supplier, which is what Import Yeti is good at, what is a good supplier? And there's a lot of suppliers out there, and where, it's a long time ago, sometimes you'd get actually bad manufacturers or suppliers, but that really doesn't exist these days. If they were bad, they'd be out of business. Rather what happens is you get individual or companies that start off making something like, this dumbbell right here, and maybe this is their bread and butter product. It's what they started their business with. It's what they're the best at. And then what'll happen is they'll go ahead and a customer will say, "Hey, do you also make, plyo boxes, or do you make barbells, or do you make, these other fitness areas?" And they say, "Of course." And they start making these products, but it's not really what they're best at. And so the correct frame for that question is not how do I find a good supplier. It's how do I find a supplier that is great at making a particular product. And when you can do that, a few kind of key things happen. One, you get, that company tends to be much more specialized in labor. The people who are making that product are a lot better at making it. They're going to make less errors. They're more efficient. Two, the company has much, much, much better equipment to make those products. They can afford to buy the newest machinery. The machinery is the quickest. They buy more raw materials, so they get better price discounts on those things. And then, from there, those cost savings get passed on to you. So you get getting a supplier that is, has a cheaper product, that's higher quality. They typically can make it faster, all the pros. So if we can say what a good supplier is, then we can start to say, how do we kind of find that supplier? And here's how Import Yeti solves that issue. So if we take dumbbells as an example, right? And this is a product I actually imported using Import Yeti. What Import Yeti does is it takes all of the shipping data and kind of visualizes it. So if Min is it has a coffee mug factory inside of China, and I have a coffee mug store in the United States as an example, which I don't have. But if I bought 1,000 coffee mugs from you, that shipping document would say Dave bought 1,000 coffee mugs from Min. And then on Import Yeti, you can search Dave, or you could search Min, and you could see their products, who they're importing, what they're moving. So with the dumbbell, what I did is I asked around the fitness community, and I said, "Hey, who makes the best dumbbells?" And I got a series of answers, and one of which was American Barbell. And so if we go into Import Yeti here, if you want to pull up my screen real quick, and we type in American Barbell, and I've got them right here, and I go ahead and click on the company, I could look at them and I could see their shipments and how they vary. And I can essentially see who their suppliers are. And the supplier they happen to choose for these barbells is called Top Asia Sport Industrial. And I can look at Top Asia Sport Industrial, and I can see who their kind of supplier or their customers are. And we have American Barbell, who is the company that was recommended. Barter Sports, which is actually another great company. Life Fitness, they've got some great customers, which means this might be a good supplier for barbells.
Wow, that's very helpful. I think some of the buyers I've talked with, they also use this website to do a due diligence about the suppliers and their record, and in the past, and then who they work with, and things like that. So that's a really great tool to do due diligence for your suppliers. But also another question I got a lot is buyers, when they always look for the supplier for the largest companies or famous companies, right? Like what you just show us. And also sometimes they want to work with largest factories, but sometimes even when they're a startup. But I always think that buyers finding a supplier is like a matchmaking. You should find the one that actually fits what you're looking for. So how would you advise our audience to be more realistic and find the one that fits?
Yeah, you are so spot on this. Like probably the number one search on Import Yeti is either people trying to find Lululemon suppliers or Nike suppliers. And realistically, if you want to make Air Jordans or Lululemon leggings, like you have to be a huge company to pick up that supplier. And even when you do, it's not like they're going to let you make an Air Jordan. That's protected by intellectual property rights. So the way I like to frame that is really saying, where would I fit in this supplier's business model? You know, uh, like if you're going to be the smallest person on the list, you're probably not the right person for that. And Import Yeti can help with these problems. If we go back to my screen right here, we could see that American Barbell is importing, which is the #1 customer for Top Asia Sport. If we could go back to my screen real quick, we could see that American Barbell is the #1 importer there, but there's also Alder Sports, and they're moving 1 shipment, 3 shipments a month. That's a reasonable number. This would be probably a pretty good match if you're starting out. Now, if we look at something like, we go to a Lululemon example, we pull up Lululemon, and we look at their larger suppliers, they're moving 50, 40 containers a month. That's more than a container a day. They're not going to be the right fit in that situation. So it's really about trying to say, how would I fit within their customer list? And ideally, you want to be at least a medium-sized fish, if not a large fish in the pond. You're not going to get the same levels of service. You're not going to get the same levels of quality control. They're not going to pay the same attention to you if you're customer number 200, if they're even going to do business with you.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I've heard some good stories from the buyers when they start up their business. They also work with smaller factories, and they become long-term partners and grow together. So I think those are really great stories to share as well. So when you probably start sourcing a lot of sourcing projects. So when you start a project, a question people ask me a lot is, so before I talk to suppliers, right?
Yeah.
What's the first step? What do I need to prepare?
Yeah. That's a very, very good question. And I think that it kind of affects things in 2 ways. The first thing is that understanding what the product is and the cost structures associated with that product actually help you, even as you look through suppliers, gain a better understanding of which supplier might be right. I'll talk about that in 1 second. But also it has a big impact when you're actually speaking with them. And I like to do a few things that can kind of help with that. If we use this, dumbbell as an analogy, or this little kettlebell here, it's one. It's easy to say with these products that they're very similar, but in reality, they're different. And by going on places like YouTube and searching online, you can start to understand some things. Like, this is made out of essentially cast iron, which is a raw good, and it's used in machinery that doesn't involve a lot of human labor. So you could take the cost structure of just this product and say it's likely mostly the raw goods, and here's how it's made. Whereas with something like this, barbell, it's a little bit different. Although there is a lot of really important raw goods involved in this steel, this individual piece is machined by hand, like a human being puts it kind of in the thing, the machine does it, and the human being takes it out. These things are screwed on by hand. This foam is dipped by hand. This logo is pressed in by hand. And so those are the 2 first most important cost structures with a product, is typically the raw goods and the labor. And understanding these things is going to help you, better, negotiate and better understand the products. Then there's all sorts of ancillary things as well. You have things like packaging. You have the things like freight forwarding costs. And some of these things aren't even related to the supplier. They're just part of your cost structures as a whole. And if you take freight forwarding and packaging, those 2 things actually have a relationship in regards to how many you can fit inside of a container. One of the biggest areas I see for improvement with packaging is not in the actual packaging cost. It's in the efficiency of packaging when it goes into a container, especially with the container rates being so high these days. If you can fit in 30% more or 40% more in a container, that results in 30 or 40% less in shipping costs oftentimes. And then you go further on down the chain, and there's things like inventory storage costs, warehousing costs, barcoding costs, and understanding all of these things helps you really, grasp how you can, structure good deals with suppliers and the things to ask for to keep those costs low, and to have more educated conversations, which is a huge part. You want to come across to that vendor like you're an expert at what you're trying to import. And if you don't know even the basics, they can't take you that seriously as a buyer.
Yeah, definitely. I think understanding the cost structure for your products all the way to the landing cost and inventory costs, right? And packaging and also the core products and raw materials. And I think those are definitely the points where you can start launching a product.
Yeah.
So once you understand all the structure, I think you're almost ready, looking for factories and looking for suppliers. So I think a lot of the buyers, they ask, how can I find factories directly and quickly? So you are the expert on that. So would you walk us through your thought process and how you do that?
Yeah. So the first one was the kind of barbell analogy I talked about earlier, which we actually imported those things, and that was found straight from Import Yeti. The second workflow I like to do a lot is find suppliers on Alibaba. And this was a product I actually imported, which is kettlebells. This was a little keychain thing they gave me, which is kind of fun, but there's a whole bunch of kettlebells we imported as well. And what I really, really love is, if you want to look at my screen real quick, there was a new tab on Alibaba called the Manufacturers tab, which this cuts out a lot of the trade groups and people who don't really kind of manufacture the products, and it focuses on just people that in theory are going to be much, much better suppliers if you're trying to source products than kind of other people. And so with this example, I'm going to go into the Manufacturers tab, and I'm just going to type in kettlebell. And I'm going to see a handful of results. Now, it's important to note here, we still have the same kind of issues we were talking about before, which is what makes a great supplier. And there's some other things too that we can talk about later as the other factors that make great suppliers. But once I see one here, what I typically do is I look out this one, and we actually imported from this company, Rizal Bulking. But I'll take Rizal Bulking, I'll go back into Import Yeti, and I'll type in I'll find that supplier, pull up their kind of profile, look at them, and then begin to look for, who their customers are and what their kind of, I clicked on the wrong one. Rizal Bulking, here we go. Who their customers are and what they're importing. And I look here, I see Ill Ventures, which is a huge, huge kettlebell company, probably the number one. There's also Bells of Steel. This indicates that this is a supplier that specializes in kettlebells and is likely going to be a great fit. And they created a great product, for the record, when I actually imported from them. Another factor I like to look at, which is super, super important, is geographically, where should I be choosing suppliers? And I like to approach this two ways. The first way is if I go back to Alibaba, most Chinese suppliers and other international suppliers will have their name or the location they're in the title. And the reason why this is so important is, a good analogy is, like, you think about Silicon Valley. Why is it that all startups, or not all startups, but the majority of startups start in a place like Silicon Valley? Well, it's because they've got the lawyers there that specialize in startups. They've got the VC firms there. They've got a huge talent pool of people that are great at tech. They've got, a lot of other support structures around, like mentorship and things like that, to really make these companies great. And the same thing is true times 50, both within country and within sub-region of country when it comes to importing products. So you can imagine, if you're dealing with a bunch of ironwork, as an example, the colleges that teach people how to be great at that ironwork or in a particular area, the giant iron foundries that provide the raw iron are close. You can imagine how much of a difference your cost structure is if there's an iron foundry that's 10 miles down the road versus 800 miles down the road. Iron's heavy. It takes a lot of time and money to move that stuff, and it's right down the street. You get those cost savings. They've got better talent pools. It's just all sorts of great things. And so if I look at this listing in Alibaba, we can see we've got, number one is from Nantong, number two is from Rizal, number three is from Nantong, number four is from Nantong, number five is from Beijing, Number 6 is from Nantong. We got Shangzi, and we got Rizhao. So far, the ones that seem like the two biggest are, Nantong and Rizhao, which means those are probably good locations to be doing this sort of work. If I saw one here that happened to say Guangzhou, I'd be really worried. I'd be like, is that what they specialize in? And the same thing is true, it applies to countries. Like ironwork is almost all done inside of a place like China. Whereas textile manufacturing, you could choose, India or Vietnam or China. And there's even differences between the, what type of textiles each one is great at producing. If you find that area that has geographic excellence, you tend to get a supplier that, just like earlier, has better costs, lower defect rates, quicker turns.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I really like your example, and you showed. I think the industry zones and also the country of specialty is definitely a factor we should consider. So once you found a list of potential suppliers after research, so the next step will be reaching out. Sometimes I find it's a little bit tricky how to reach out to the suppliers and how to communicate effectively. And I've seen some kind of miscommunication happening during my work time as well. So how can you share your best practice and tips how to reach out to the suppliers and how do you communicate with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first thing I like to kind of paint this picture through an analogy, which is imagine I'm sitting in this office right here, and somebody walks into my office and they go, "Hey, I want to buy, a bunch of these dumbbells. In what situation do I give the person a good price? And in what situation does the person get a bad price?" And you could start to guess, kind of what those factors are. Some of the big ones are if the person orders a lot, he's going to get, a good price. If the person is ordering a lot frequently, the person is going to get a good price. If the person is growing in his orders, he's going to get a good price. If the person is an easy sale, he's going to get a good price, which is a huge one. Like, the headache factor, like, is this person taking a ton of my time? Is he asking all these questions? Because you imagine what the manufacturer's trying to do is they're trying to make money too. You don't want, this is kind of contrary to, a lot of popular belief, but you actually want your manufacturers to have healthy businesses. You want to treat them like a partner. And if both of you guys can make money, that's the best case scenario. So if you think about things from those terms, the question is, how do you frame the communication with that vendor so you get those things across? And let's juxtapose that against what is like a common message that a lot of people will preach on how to reach out to vendors. They'll say something like this, "My name is Dave. I'm an Amazon seller. What are the MOQs and price for these dumbbells?" Right? When you hear that as a manufacturer, partially because you've received 100 other emails like this before, you think this person is caring about the smallest quantity they can humanly order because they're asking about MOQs in the first few lines. This person's likely not going to be a long-term customer because I've gotten a ton of these, Amazon requests, and they don't always pan out to be the best. Even if you are, they're still associating that with you because of what you said. 3, this person's going to be hyper concerned with price and isn't going to be concerned about things like quality or all these other great things our factory offers, right? That would be like the worst case email. So then the best case, which is on the other side of the equation, would probably be the way a super large company reaches out to them, which is instead they say something like this: "Hi, if I was at Walmart, hi, my name is Dave Applegate. I'm a pro, I'm in charge of the sourcing team at Walmart. We're interested in bringing in some dumbbells. Your company has come highly recommended to us. I'd love to hop on the phone, better understand your company, what you have to offer, and see if we can potentially work together." And then what happens is the salesperson goes, "Hey, I think we have a big customer on our hands. Let's set up a conference call between, senior management, whether it's the chief sales officer or the CEO or whoever, vice president or whatever, and the salesperson. And they give a presentation and you guys start to, build a relationship together." And I think it's really important you don't misrepresent yourself. If you're not Walmart, you shouldn't say you're Walmart, but you could still tell a story and paint yourself in a positive light, and everyone's going to have strengths. that they can kind of would help, alleviate those concerns. And once you're done starting to build some of that relationship, the next thing is start to work through some of the product challenges, which is why it was so important earlier to understand things like cost structures and how products are being made, because that's what allows you to have those informed conversations with the vendor that positions yourself as somebody who is serious about this product. If you're importing a dumbbell and you don't know that this is PU rubber and you're saying, oh, it's rubber coated, you don't appear like a serious buyer that's going to be likely a great customer. So you need to know this stuff in advance. But as you work through those options, it's what's going to let you understand the cost differences, what direction to turn. Maybe there's 3 types of rubber, and you ask the question, hey, I'm aware of PU, and I think the other one is UV rubber. Which one is more durable? What are the cost differences between the two? And they'll be honest with you. They'll say, hey, the thickness of the bar here plays a key role. And if you make it a little bit thinner because there's so much raw material costs, you can save money in this situation. And, that conversation then is what leads to probably what is the negotiation, which is the third step. I only do that once I feel like there's a strong relationship. They really understand that I'm going to be able to add a bunch of value to their business and I'm going to be a great customer. And we agree on what we think a stellar product is. And then when we have that negotiation, it's going to be a different type of negotiation because they're going to understand that product quality is going to be important. I'm going to be a long-term customer, so they're not going to want to have any, issues on the first order. They're going to give me a great price out the gate because they value my business. We're going to be partners together. And that's the way I kind of, at a super high level, approach communicating with vendors.
Yeah, so let me recap quickly. So first, make sure you frame yourself correctly and build confidence with suppliers. And then second, work out the details and options of the products, understand your product cost structure before you reach out to the supplier. And last, negotiate with supplier after you build a relationship with them. So you're more confident, you're more honest, and move forward with actually building the product together. So so I think those are really great advice. So to our audience, if you have any comments or questions for Dave, please leave them in the comment section and we will get to them very soon. So let's talk about supply chain, which is like the hottest hashtag of last 12 months. So you use a lot of import customs data, the real import data. So based on the data, Dave, do you see any trends in sourcing you can share with our audience?
Yeah. I think the first one is post-COVID, kind of still in a little bit of the tailwind of COVID issues, which is although, supply chain and, factories are getting much better, they still are having issues. There still are outbreaks occasionally. They're having a hard time bringing workforces in. Some of this varies by area, but really, really making sure that you're utilizing tools like demand planning and communicating with your vendors very far in advance what your orders are going to be, because they're likely going to take longer. And you want to give that manufacturer flexibility to try to accomplish getting your order out. If they recognize, hey, we're going to have an order due in 6 months, even if we only started 2 months before that 6-month period, they have more opportunity to make sure they're staffing appropriately, purchasing the raw goods, which might take a lot longer. Their job becomes a lot easier, and you're going to get your products quicker, and you're going to get typically higher quality with less kind of headaches along the way. And that's, I think, one of the first huge trends we've saw. I think the second one, which everybody's talking about, is building supply chain resilience and trying to reduce risk in your supply chains. And the truth of the matter is people are doing a really bad job of actually changing their existing supply chains. It's kind of like when you develop a friendship. Unless something really crazy happens, you don't break that friendship up, even if it kind of, gets a little shady at moments. But I think there's a lot of change in the way people are starting to strategically source their products and choosing better supply chains to begin with. They're thinking about problems differently. They're starting to ask questions about, is this supplier resilient? Do they have the right kind of, are they out of the right location? Are they truly good at making this product? Because those sorts of things, make a big difference when the bad things happen. that's that partner that if you chose a truly stellar one is going to do a better job of weathering that storm with you. Which is why tools like Import Yeti and a lot of other tools out there too can play such a key role um, in helping you with that. Another thing, that I've seen a big trend on is people who are ordering things on Alibaba using things like even the manufacturer tab. I mentioned that earlier. That makes a huge difference. There's also the pro buyer group, which I think makes a huge difference in the framing of, as we were talking about in the previous question, for kind of ensuring you get the best prices, because of the fact that when you message that supplier, they can see that you're a serious buyer, that you buy lots of stuff on the platform. So using tools is another trend we saw, whether it's tools on Alibaba, tools on Import Yeti, tools on the Census Bureau data. Really any of that stuff makes a huge difference as well.
Yeah, so for the audience, the Pro Buyers and Buyers Club is one of the new initiatives we launched this year. So if you log into your user account, buyer account, you can see which kind of level you will be at. And if you're a pro buyer, which means your revenue is over $1 million, or you have purchased over $300,000 on Alibaba, you're qualified to be a pro buyer, and you have a lot of exclusive benefits being a pro buyer. So check out more on the Alibaba.com. So you talk about some companies diversify their supply chain. Do you see like a trend, like more companies will diversify their supply chain or make any directional changes? Because I've read some news about a few like lead companies, right? Like the biggest company, they kind of trying to migrate to different regions. So do you see a trend?
Yeah, I think with the biggest companies, we definitely do. Those people are the ones, like you can imagine if you're making dumbbells and you're making 50,000 of these things a year or something like that. It's easy to have 3 factories, but the fact of the matter is most of us aren't choosing 50 factories. We've got to pick 1 factory for our dumbbells, and as much as I wish I was as big as Walmart was, I'm not. And so, really the thing, the big change has been not in the, diversification, but it's as they're choosing things, they're moving into kind of, different regions they have in the past, which cause all of these challenges they had not thought of. China is so good at manufacturing, and there's so many things they do excellent that we don't even realize, like they're great at Forex, because the US currency and the Chinese currency are tied together. Very, very stable currency with very easy money transfers. They've got a great workforce, and as you start to move into different regions, like we'll take, Argentina or Vietnam, those things aren't there. So you have to, learn new skill sets. How do you transfer money into a place like Argentina? What are the Forex issues associated with moving to things like Argentina? How about Vietnam? What are the, everybody knows that there's Chinese New Year and that is when factories, have a lower output. But what is the equivalent in Vietnam? How do you, deal with that stuff so that you can make sure your, products are still manufactured? So that big change in kind of, I think supply chain is in the design of them in the beginning. People are thinking about them in different ways. They're having to deal with challenges they've never dealt with before.
Yeah. So currency exchange and supply chain and a lot of like the port blockage, delay in shipping. It's a lot of external factors that actually have an impact on the buyers, right, and importing. So what is your advice to our audience on trying to stay competitive in spite of all the external factors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that if you're, and this kind of gets back to what we're talking about in the very beginning, if you're truly creating something that's great, like the product itself is good, people want to buy it, it becomes way easier to remain competitive than if you're trying to sell something, at a cheap price. I've used this analogy before, or story before, but when I was really young, much to my mother's kind of dismay, I was selling cigar cutters on eBay. And I was selling these cigar cutters at like $10 a cigar cutter. It was costing me 50 cents to manufacture them overseas or something like that. And then I woke up one day and let's say I was doing 10 sales a day or something like that. So making, $95 a day. And I wake up one day and I have no sales. And then I'm like, why was that? And I look on eBay and someone's selling cigar cutters at $9. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. So I changed my price to $8.50. And then I wake up next day, I have $85 in profit or whatever. And then 3 days goes by and then I wake up and there's no sales. And this repeats until this dude's selling cigar cutters at like $1.25 with free shipping. And I lose money on every single cigar cutter I sell. That was a horrible business model. I was, like, that's not good, because I had no difference other than the fact that I was trying to compete on price on eBay with the same cigar cutters that everybody else was selling. And I see a lot of people try to do things like that. And so if I were to shift and say, how can I make the coolest cigar cutters in the world, just like the best ones, and really innovate and listen to people who are, cigar aficionados, I probably would have created something people would have wanted to buy my product. It would have been resilient and would have had lasting business value.
Yeah, well, that's very funny, because I think a lot of the first generation of internet entrepreneur all started on eBay, right? So yeah, that's a good learning lesson. I totally agree. Creating value for your product and your brand, and actually add true value to customers, that's definitely very key factor. So I think now we have a lot of questions from the audience. Let's turn to the audience and see how we can help with the questions. So first, how to order in stock items and get in very fast? Do you have any tricks on that?
Yeah. So, I think that I am generally not a fan of ordering in stock items, because an in stock item is what everybody else is selling. The only time I think that there's a lot of value there is if it's an ancillary product. Like, as an example, I have a retail store, and let's say we have some great private label products. People are coming up and they want to buy a keychain at the front, or something like that. That could be a good example of when to buy those kind of in stock products. But generally speaking, I try to avoid that stuff. Where I try to work with is the manufacturers to improve my lead time, which I think is the key thing. And if you do demand planning well and you walk them through stuff, kind of what timelines you're hoping to do, manufacturers will be very accommodating. I also will have manufacturers oftentimes store inventory for it, because it's much cheaper to store inventory in China than it is the United States, and they can ship at once, especially over things like air, which can be a huge, huge, huge cost savings in warehouse fees, and really be great for your supply chain.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, especially creating your brand and differentiate your product from the market. But I think some of the buyers of Alibaba, because we have 40 million buyers, and sometimes they want something really quickly. There may be different needs. So we do have a ready to ship RTS section on the website. And during the Super September, we have the on-time delivery promise for the buyers to take advantage of that. So I think a combination of getting something quickly and also creating your own brand and products will be a great way to go. Yeah, so great. So next question. So sometimes we buy things, and sometimes the offers, the suppliers offer don't fit my sourcing needs. So what do I do? Let me repeat the question. So what if the supplier's offers doesn't fit my sourcing need? Maybe there's a communication or some issues there.
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand exactly what those needs are. But the way I would generally approach that is, if you're clear what as we talked about earlier, not every supplier is the right fit for you. If you are trying to make, something at the factory that Nike is, you're not going to have a good time. It's not the right fit. And so being very clear in those things, kind of understanding yourself, makes a huge difference. And beginning to communicate those things in those beginning stages where you're setting expectations, and positioning yourself correctly, that makes a huge difference. And there are suppliers that are great at, as an example, we have a supplier that helps us make super short run, super short turn, individually customized garments. Right. that is a difference than our supplier that helps us make, extremely long run, long lead time, high volume garments. They're different factories set up for different things.
Hmm.
And you need to, there's ways you can profile those things. One of the ways I do it is I'll look and see what people are moving similar to me on sites like Import Yeti and look at those factories. So if you're trying to find somebody that makes those short run garments, say, who are the best people that who sell these short run garments, and then reach out to those factories. Whereas if you're trying to find long run, which would be like let's say extremely long run, like Nike, I would say, what factories is Nike using if I was on that?
Yeah, definitely. So next question is, what is the minimum can I buy in the equipment? So, well, I can help with the question. I think when you search, you can actually put in MOQ in the search filter. If you want to buy one, just put one in there. So
Yeah.
for large machinery equipment, I don't know, Dave, you have bought any, but usually they can have a pretty low or MOQ as low as one. So it really depends on the type of products.
Yeah, I like to think of MOQ as honestly like a myth. Like really, what people are saying with MOQ is that this is the amount what they're trying to say is I want to push out people that are not the right customer fit. Like that's what the goal of the manufacturer is. If I position myself as a potential long-term buyer and I'm going to be a very valuable customer to them and they understand that, and they're behind that vision, MOQ disappears. And like as an example, if I'm importing certain exercise equipment, what I'll do is they'll see that I run a store that sells exercise stuff, and I'll say, hey, listen, this first order, we don't have a long relationship yet, and I want to build off of wins. I want us to have a good first order, and if something does happen, I want it to be a small dollar value, so we can work through it together and not have to deal with a big dollar value issue. And when things are phrased that way, they're like, of course, we're gonna make a small order for you because it's gonna build the relationship. In those situations, they'll only do one-off products, 10 off products, 30 off products, and I call it a sample order. It's not even a real order, it's a sample order. And sometimes we'll do these things to test the market as an example. If I am thinking of building a product and I don't know if it's going to be successful, I'll be very honest with you. I'll say, hey, we're a great company. You can see us here. We sell a lot of these things. This has been an idea we've thought of. I think it's going to do very well, but we don't want to take an inventory position yet until we test the market properly. Here's what we'd like our sample order to be. And as long as you look at what their actual order volume is, and you go, we're going to have no issues hitting this if we end up being successful, the company's going to be okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I want to shout out to Roy from the audience. He says this is extremely helpful, and I love Import Yeti.
Woo! I love you too, Roy.
Love that. So next question. So someone, I think an audience asking about 1688. So I can help explaining the difference between 1688 and Alibaba.com. So 1688 is actually for Chinese buyers. It's domestic B2B website, and Alibaba.com is designed for global buyers. So we have all the trading support, right? You can have payment, have logistics, and you have trade assurance to protect buyers. So Alibaba.com is designed to support global buyers. So that's a good question to clarify.
I think one quick thing on that too is 1688 is an awesome platform, but it's gotten popular in recent years because people think the prices are lower on 1688 than they are Alibaba, which is a myth. Really, what it is, customers on 1688 tend to be more sophisticated for people on Alibaba, which attracts a little more of a beginner buyer, I think, sometimes. And so suppliers will oftentimes, quote higher prices out of the gate. If you manage those expectations well, and you do things kind of correctly, you're going to get the same price on Alibaba, if not better, than you are 1688. It's just a matter of, representing yourself correctly.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, both 1688 and Alibaba.com are under the Alibaba group. So we're different units under the same company. So another question, what I think someone from the audience wants to see how can I reach out to you or contact you. So do you want them to go to your website? Is there a way to contact you through the website?
Yeah, I mean, if you could just go to the about page or the contact us page, my email address is everywhere. It's the Yeti at ImportYeti.com. You can also friend me on LinkedIn or, pretty much any method works fine.
Yeah,
Of course.
awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of our buyers are a huge fan of yours. I mentioned before. So I have a quick question. So Dave, how do you go about finding product ideas? I think that's like very early stage of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
launching a business. I'm just really curious.
yeah. I think like if I contrast it with the way I think I've done it before in the past, the mistakes I made, I think it becomes a little bit more stronger, which is when I was younger, I would do things more like the cigar cutter thing, which is I would go onto websites and I would see whether it's Amazon or eBay or Walmart or whatever. And I'd say, what seems to be selling? And then, how much can I import or source it for? And what's the cost difference? And effectively that's manufacturing arbitrage. You know, can I buy a product for a little bit cheaper than I sell a product for? And that's not a win strategy because ultimately those markets get efficient and you end up in spots where there's just not much money, not much profit made. And you see that when you're spending tons of time trying to find the product via that method.
Mm.
Instead, I like to do a few things. The first thing is look internally and say, what do I wish existed in the world? What am I passionate about? One of the things I'm super stoked on and I love is I love writing. I love fountain pens. And here's a cool little fountain pen I got. You can put ink inside of it. The ink community in the fountain pen space is crazy, and I see people constantly release new, really cool ink colors. And I go, oh, I want to buy it, and because I'm in that community and I'm in that spot, there's probably a lot of opportunity to create cool looking inks. Now, it's not me copying someone else's ink color. It's me learning how to make inks and then selling them. So I'll look at myself. The second thing is I talk to customers all the time, and I just say, hey, help me understand. And I really try to understand their worldview, what they're looking for. If they've got cigar cutters, what is it they hate about cigar cutters? Is it that the cigar cutter blades are not sharp enough? So they like chomp and it like bends the end of the cigar. Okay, well, what if I get surgically sharpened blades, done a special way? And I can, create a product that's truly innovative. Maybe it's that they're looking for a specific design that doesn't exist. Maybe they're looking for one that fits in their wallet. I don't know what the answer is, but if you spend the time really understanding that customer, that gives you, great places to potentially see value. And I think that's ultimately the habit that leads to finding great products is how do you put yourself in front of and then identify areas where where there can be improvement, products, and being a consumer of those things helps as well.
Yeah, sounds great. So we're getting to the end of this webinar. So Dave, what is the last piece of advice you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I mean, use ImportYeti.com.
Yes, definitely. And Alibaba.com.
And Alibaba, yeah.
You'll win the future.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Dave. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you today. It was so insightful. Thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah. Okay. If anybody has any questions, anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me. And it was a pleasure being on.
And Import Yeti is very hot on TikTok and social media as well. So definitely check out the hashtags. So, go ahead.
I have to say, I don't, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I'm more popular on TikTok than those like teenage girls are. And I would never picture that being the case.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Social media. Never know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This session is recorded and will be shared on Alibaba's official channels, such as LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So make sure you check out Dave's website, ImportYeti.com, to learn more. The same time next week, we'll have the provider, Natalie, to join us. She owns multiple online stores and she will share her secret being competitive in the online retail industry, and especially in pets, home goods, and babies categories. So we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, everyone.